Welcome to Health UnaBASHed, the show that is unapologetically passionate about health and wellness innovation that promotes a sustainable and equitable healthcare delivery and financing system. Hosted by digital health advocate, author, and thought leader Gil Bashe, the show looks at the thought-provoking ideas, people, and companies that are making a difference. I'm Gregg Masters, the producer and co-host of the show, and join Gil as we engage industry talent who share their insights and best practices to create sustainable change. On today's show, our guests are OBGYN Jeff Livingston, MD, CEO of Macarthur Medical Center in Irving, Texas, and Rush University System for Health critical care hospitalist Hesham Hassaballa MD, who weigh in on the general theme of clinician vulnerability and the important question of who heals the healer. Clinician burnout amidst a growing body of professional exits, chronic staffing shortages, and disturbing levels of depression and even suicide associated with a protracted pandemic continues to take its toll on our frontline clinicians, challenging their emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. And with that introduction, Gil, over to you.
Gregg, thank you once again. That was wonderful. Always good to work with you, my friend. We have two amazing guests with us today on Health UnaBASHed. Dr. Jeff Livingston, he's the CEO of Macarthur Medical Center. We have Dr. Hesham Hassaballa, who is the intensivist. He's a pulmonologist. He's an ICU expert. He's at Rush. And they've become more than industry colleagues. They've become friends. We're involved in an endeavor together, a very important endeavor called Medico Life. And Medico Life is a platform that really invites people involved in the health sector to express themselves in health opinion and issues, in medical issues, in issues of belief and faith. It is really a home to physicians. And I want to start off in asking first Jeff and then Hesham about their involvement, how this all started, because these two gentlemen, these two clinicians of note are pioneers in doing something very unusual. They are activist physicians who are not only dedicating their lives to sustain and save life in the medical centers every day in which they work, they're also out there sharing their points of view openly, candidly, with hundreds of thousands of people each year through their writing. They're journalists, they're op-ed writers. I understand that Hesham has even published a book or two. But more than that, they inspire me. They inspire millions of people around America. Jeff and Hesham, you went to medical school. You rose to the top of your professions. You're head of a hospital system. You're head of a team doing critical care work at a major hospital. Why writing? Why become authors of really amazing content? Jeff, what kicked you off to do this? Why?
Yeah, no, thank you for all of those kind words. I really appreciate it. And I've really valued our friendship as well. And I think without all of these things, we wouldn't have connected. It's just such a huge honor. But no, to answer your question, I think all of us, we have a creative side inside of us that needs to get out in some way. And for some doctors these days, that's making funny videos on TikTok. And I have loved to see the creatives making this amazing content. For others, it's through social media. And for me, it was always public speaking. I spent the last 15 years of my career doing public speaking. And then I got a little bit older, a little bit more tired. And then when the pandemic hit, I needed an outlet. And I had dabbled in writing here and there. And I found a platform called Medium. Got started on that. And I kind of noticed the health content was a little bit all over the map. There wasn't a great place to consolidate that. I met an amazing friend now who lives in the Philippines, Robert Turner, and we started our own publication on Medium called Being Well. And through that, we would search through the Medium writers, and we would find other people producing really great health content. And then we would go and recruit them and get them to join us. And what we found are doctors like Hesham. We found you and other really talented people from all different aspects of healthcare. And what you would see is everybody came at it from a slightly different perspective. I mean, Hesh, like for you were doing cutting edge COVID stuff. I mean, as any new treatment or protocol came out, you were living it day in, day out. And I learned so much just from reading your stuff. From my side, I represent kind of a normal doctor. I go to work, I see patients in the office, and I take care of women. I'm an OBGYN. Well, no one was consolidating the information on pregnancy. The American Board of OB-GYN, it took a while for me to realize, but they didn't know anything more than I did in March of 2020. So putting together this network of writers who could not only just talk about COVID and combat misinformation, but get into the broader scheme of healthcare. Where's the patient voice? What are the physicians feeling? And we really tried to hit that human element. And the more I recruited, the more I read, the better writer I became as well. And ultimately, as we'll talk about later, that ended up becoming Medico Life.
Yeah, thank you for that. And by the way, Jeff, thank you for discovering me on Medium and inviting me to Being Well, because as you said, I never would have met you and Robert and Hesham had it not been for, you're sort of on the search for talent. And Hesham, I mean, what compelled you to start the journey? I mean, speaking of COVID, you're in the ICU. You've been on the front lines of infectious disease management and struggling to keep people alive for the last 2 years. And certainly the most vulnerable are still heading your way. And we often feel protected because of vaccination and the booster shot, certainly hand washing, wearing masks. But face it, people who have high risks are headed your way every single day. What started your writing? Why on Medium? Why on Being Well? And then over to Medico Life?
Well, thank you, Gil. It's so nice to be with Jeff and see him in person. We've only spoken on the phone, and I've followed his writing and everything. So it's great to see him in person. Good to see you, Gil, as well. Gregg, thanks so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. I've been writing for well over 2 decades. It was active when I was younger in medical school. It was activism, social activism, political activism. Then I moved into the religious space. I'm a very deeply devout person, and I did that for a while. And then I figured that I think where my expertise is in medicine. I'm not the world's expert in critical care or medicine by any means. But I live and breathe medicine every single day. I've only ever wanted to be a physician ever since I was a little boy. So, and I got into writing I've been writing for two decades, and it was interesting. English was my hardest subject, my worst subject in elementary school and high school. So it's ironic that now the easiest thing that comes to me is writing a piece. And what I love most about writing is that it keeps me, one, it's cathartic. So it'll be 13 years ago in June, we lost our eldest child to cancer. And honest to God, the Lord saved my life through my writing, because it was the only way that I could process all of the horrific emotion, all of the horror that came with surviving or burying my child. And it's cathartic for me, and it's therapeutic. And I mean, I still remember the first thing I wrote after she died. I was working a telemedicine shift, and I just sat down at my desk and processing what happened. And I just said, I have to write something. And not even 10 minutes, and I had this super long piece, just going through what happened. And I didn't share it with anybody. I just posted it, and then people sought me out and said, I read what you wrote, and I was bawling, or you took us there, or, oh my God, I read what you were writing, and I never shared it with anybody. So writing has always been therapeutic for me. And the pandemic was no different. All the emotions that I shared and I felt, and all the horror that I was seeing before my eyes, I had to write it. I have to write about it to help me process it. The other thing about writing that I love is that it keeps me honest, because if I write it, I have to live it. I'm a lay pastor, and I give the sermon sometimes during religious services. And if I speak it, I have to live it. But writing is no different. So if I write about it, then I have to walk the walk. So it keeps me honest. And if I wrote something and then I change my practice, I have to write to correct the record. Even though what does it matter? It matters to me, because if I wrote it in the past, this is how I believe, and my belief has changed because I've grown older, I've become more mature, I'm not as naive. I got to correct the record.
Yeah, Hesham, this is so important. It's almost a declaration, and we're making ourselves vulnerable out there. We're sharing a point of view, and I want to swing back to Jeff for a second. And by the way, Hesham, I read the pieces about your daughter's death, and we exchanged some private notes on that, of course, and it's something I identify with, unfortunately, very strongly. And I sometimes think we see physicians who it's so important for them to be clinical experts. And what comes across in both of your writings is your vulnerability as people who are physicians. And I find that to be so refreshing. I'm wondering, Jeff, if you could start, and Hesham, you could add in. I just wrote a piece that appeared on Medical Life about my physician father-in-law's death, the last 12 days of his life.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And I was amazed at how doctors really wanted to be in the know, and they feel they have to be in the know, and they have a word for it when they're not in the know that sounds like they're in the know. Well, you're suffering from idiopathic pain.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Idiopathic. This is an idiopathic symptom. And it sounds like, thank God they've diagnosed me. I have idiopathic something or other, which means kind of Latin for I don't know what you have. But doctors kind of are trained to have this confidence. And the two of you are so refreshingly vulnerable and real as human beings. How do you kind of reconcile your writing, which, as Hesham just said, he's bringing forth his soul. He's going on record as a person and as a physician, and yet this whole sort of veneer of the doctor who knows everything. I mean, Jeff, what's your thoughts about that?
So the way I practice, and really the way I try to live my life, is to be authentic and just to get it out there. But like Hesh said, when you write, there's a surface level writing that comes out first, but getting and digging beneath the surface and finding that emotion and that passion in there, that's when it becomes therapeutic. And for me, I hope one day my kids go back and read my stuff, starting at the beginning of the pandemic to now, because you can actually, and I know I've read all of Hesh's, I know I can see it in his too. You can watch our mental and our emotional state going down and then coming back up. We needed to portray that. There's articles that we wrote that were about us, but they weren't. What we were trying to do is express, here's what's going out there in the medical world. This is what the doctors are feeling. This is what they're experiencing. And what a strange time to have this disease attacking the entire world that we don't know anything about. And in the beginning of this, we didn't know anything. That is not a position physicians are comfortable in. They're vulnerable every day. And so one of my favorite stories I wrote was, I Love You, Don't Touch Me. And this was the first summer of COVID. And I talked about every day that I came home, I took all of my clothes off in the garage. I put a bathrobe on. I walked through the outside and entered my bedroom and went straight to the shower because I didn't want to see my family.
I still do that.
And I sat down on the couch, and my 12-year-old moved to the other end of the couch, and it just broke my heart. But writing that and sharing it, that's a way for other doctors, other nurses that are doing the same thing and feeling the same thing. It's a moment that they can relate to, but also for those not in healthcare. And look, I appreciate all the people that came and wrote healthcare heroes and did chalk art and put signs. I love that. That was wonderful. But they also needed to see that at the end of the day, the doctor that went home cried. And the next morning they got in their car, and I don't mean to be overly dramatic. In the summer of 2020, when we drove to work, we did not know whether we were going to live. we drove to work thinking we may get sick and die. And that was a very, very hard thing to do. And then right before we got vaccinated, when I did get sick and got really, really sick from COVID, my worst fear kind of happened to me. And so, I think if we get into our emotions and we really pull that out, we're not going to share a diary entry. You don't need to know what I'm going to write in my diary, but what I can do is I can take my shared experience and find something that you can connect to. So whether you agree or disagree, I want to make you feel something. And that's really where we were going with all of that.
And Hesham, you wrote some magnificent pieces also. I mean, the long shifts that you had in the ICU. And, Jeff, I was thinking, Robert told me at one point that I don't remember the percentage, but a large percentage of the women that came into Macarthur to give birth were COVID positive. I mean, you can't say, well, I have COVID, I think I'll postpone my labor for another week or two. That really doesn't work so well. So, you and your colleagues are delivering babies
every day.
Every day who are COVID positive. And, I don't know if that sort of person who, is able to wear a mask when you're in pain or you have to have oxygen over them at times, or be ready, if you can mask them at the same time. So it's the risks are amplified. And Hesham, you're in the ICU. People coming in the ICU, I've worked in ICUs before, and I used to get my fair share in the middle of the night of men in their 70s or 80s with enlarged prostates that needed relief. They needed a Foley catheter. So, but for the most part, you're getting people who are really sick and need to be put on oxygen or worse, and therefore you're putting your life and your whole staff's lives on the line every single moment of the day. And you started to write quite a bit. What was there a spark? You've been writing already for 2 decades. Did your writing style change when COVID swept over us?
And if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Health Unabashed on Healthcare Now Radio. Our guests are Jeff Livingston, MD, CEO of Macarthur Medical Center in Irving, Texas, and Rush University System for Health critical care hospitalist Hesham Hassaballa MD.
No, it was just another source of inspiration. Right? It was another thing. In May of 2020, I had a young man in his 40s. He was, I wrote about this. He was struggling to breathe a little bit. He was kind of doing okay, talking to me. He just got a little bit worse, and I made the decision to place him on a ventilator, to intubate him. I took a picture before doing that. I was in my gear. I was in this wrap pose, and and the caption was going to be, "Are you down with PPE?" Yeah, I never, and that was right before I intubated him. After I intubated him, his heart stopped and he died. He was 46, I think. I never have had the courage to post that picture because it was right before he died. And I could tell an hour into the arrest that he wasn't going to make it. I mean, he came back, he opened his eyes, I was a little happy. Then he arrested again, and I just knew he was going to die. Everyone was looking at me because you could see on my face how I looked. And I left the room, I walked out of the unit, and my emotion, and I thanked one of the nurses, "Thank you so much for everything you did." My emotion was welling up, and there's about 2 months into the pandemic in 2020, May. And I walked out of the ICU, and everybody in the hospital was gathered to celebrate the discharge of another patient that day. And I was going to go and join them. And I didn't mean to time it that way. As soon as I walked out of the unit, opened the doors, everyone was there looking at me. I broke down and I sobbed openly. It came to a head at that moment. And I just kept saying, what have I done? What have I done? He was alive before, and now he's dead. What have I done? That was the darkest moment of the pandemic for me, and I had to write about it to process that emotion.
Hey, Gil, one of the things really interesting reading Hesh and working with him, and then also with Robert, the three of us, we approached a lot of this in the opposite ends of the spectrum. If you think about what does an OB-GYN do, we deal with life, we deal with birth, we deal with beginnings. We're the happy profession. But I watched his progression, and tell me if I'm wrong, but a lot of your struggles were dealing with just endless, and then after vaccination, in some ways senseless, preventable deaths. And I could feel what you felt, I mean, to some degree. And because I don't see that professionally, you gave me a much broader awareness of what was going on with the situation.
No,
Really,
that's exactly what it is. I mean, I asked my pastor, I said, you know, life and death is in God's hands. And so why do I feel so bad when everyone keeps dying, if I know that that's the will of the Lord, right? And I did the best I could. And I should stand tall knowing that I did everything I could. And he said, no, that's a noble feeling, that you feel bad that you couldn't help them, right? I mean, you feel bad that you can't, that they didn't survive. But I know that I'm not going to win every battle with critical illness. I know that. It's fine.
I'm listening to both of you, and first of all, we don't hear enough of health professionals, physicians, nurses, technicians in the scene about their feelings about the entire experience. We hear a lot about their work. We have this raging debate that shouldn't be a raging debate, but it is a raging debate about vaccinate, don't vaccinate, mask, don't mask, wash, don't wash. Basic public health dialogue, or at least discourse, is broken down. And Hesham, you wrote a wonderful piece about this, the needless deaths that go on. I remember it very clearly. So Jeff, I'm just reflecting on what you and Dr. Robert Turner did by sort of getting Being Well off the ground, consolidating authors like us onto Being Well, and then inviting us to join you both in creating Medico Life. And what was your thinking when you sort of said, yeah, they're writing on Medium, but the health stuff is all over the place. We're gonna begin to look at the authors and invite certain authors over to Being Well. What was the thinking? Because obviously, you were creating a service. You were creating a service for us, and as a result of it, this conversation is about community, right? I mean, Hesham and I, are DMing each other. We're looking at each other's stuff. We're saying, "What do you think?" Same with you. Same with Robert. Same with Dr. Michael Hunter, psychologist Patricia Farrell, and many others. I don't think yes, we're authors, but what I notice is this deep emotional connection or support we have for each other. Did you realize that was going to happen when you started this whole adventure?
I definitely did not know that was going to happen. And so Robert and I, again, we connected. We started Being Well Pub. We consolidated. We recruited great writers. But then we realized we had amassed all of this talent, really, really talented people. And they were limited to people that subscribed and read on Medium. And I just knew from my own practice experience, posting it on my own site, sure, that helps with local growth and patient education and patient engagement in my community. But you're reading all of the content people are writing, and this is a global project. This is not something that's confined to my area of Irving, Texas. So we knew we needed a third-party site. So that's why we created Medico. And we were up and running for a few months, and then the pandemic hit. Very quickly in that, and Robert Turner has one of the most amazing abilities to track down some of the misinformation stuff. So if you go back and look, we started talking about the risk to the world of the spread of dangerous misinformation long before people were talking about misinformation. I remember when Robert kind of backtracked and found the dirty dozen of people spreading it, and we just stayed ahead of the curve, while at the same time, we knew we didn't only want to be a site for COVID. So we continued to recruit authors and writers that would have a shared voice, shared experience, and like we're talking about, bring that emotion out, make doctors expose us for our humanity, and help us connect to patients. As we got further and further into that, the community built. And I don't know that it would have happened in the same way if it hadn't been for the pandemic. I think the stress that we were all under, it was such a lonely time. I think you were isolated physically, but you were also isolated emotionally and spiritually, and we needed to connect. And just a quick little, Gil, I don't know if you even know this, but Robert Turner and I, he's now one of my closest friends. I talk to him every day. We've got 2 businesses together now, and I've never met him. He lives abroad, and I've never physically met him. And I don't think this would have happened if we hadn't come together and formed this cohesive group.
No, you're absolutely right. No, I speak to Robert a few times a week, actually. We have this 7 a.m. session. I just want to let our listeners know we're referring to Dr. Robert Turner. He's a psychologist. He is a Brit who resides in the Philippines. He's married to someone from the Philippines. He's the proud father of a newborn, although he has 4 adult boys. On his own right, he has started anew. He's enjoying it. He shares with us he's much more present than he's ever been as a parent, and occasionally as we get on the phone, he'll say, just in case you hear some noise in the background, it's not a cat, it's my daughter Laura. So Robert's with us in spirit, and I just wanted to get like a word or two in. First of all, I want to thank you both. You're public health servants to this nation. When things went awry, you brought reality into our existence. You gave people who are really caring about people medically, emotionally, spiritually, voice. I want to acknowledge you both, and obviously Jeff Livingston, you kicked it off. Dr. Robert Turner joined you. Hesham, you weighed in.
Jeff has been the nicest. I'm so happy that we got to work together. I wouldn't be here without him.
And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for both of you. So I want to thank you, Gregg. I want to turn this back to you, and thank you so much.
And that's a wrap for today's broadcast. We want to thank our listeners for tuning in, and our very special guest, Jeff Livingston, MD, CEO of Macarthur Medical Center in Irving, Texas, and Rush University System for Health Critical Care Hospitalist, Hesham Hassaballa MD. Follow their work on Twitter via @JeffLivingMD, @MacOBGYN, and @HA Hassaballa MD. That's HAHASSABALLA-MD, and @Rush Medical, respectively. You can learn more about Health Unabashed on the program page at healthcarenowradio.com. We air weekly at 10:30 a.m., 6:30 p.m., and 2:30 a.m. Eastern, or 7:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m., and 11:30 p.m. Pacific. Do keep the conversation going with Gil and me on Twitter via @Gil_Bashe, and that's BASHE, and @GreggMastersMPH, and that's Gregg with 2 G's. And do remember to tag your tweets with the hashtag HealthUnabashed. Until next time, stay unapologetically passionate about improving health.